For the past couple of weeks, I've been using this variable ND plus circular polarizing filter from KNF Concepts, and I think I'm ready to make my final verdict. So in this video, we're going to be reviewing the KNF Concept 1 to 5 stop variable ND plus circular polarizer. What is up, y'all? It is a Project Photography back with another video, and today we're going to be reviewing the 1 to 5 stop variable ND plus circular polarizer from KNF Concepts. And they were gracious enough to send me one over for a review, so that's exactly what this is going to be. Now, in no way, shape, or form are they paying me to say anything or make a raving review about it. I can be as honest as I want and give you guys my full thoughts and opinions about it. So I'm also going to be reviewing this in a budget sense because it is around a $90 filter for a variable ND plus circular polarizer. So it's going to have a few caveats with that, but overall it's going to be in a budget sense. So for everyone looking for a budget circular polarizer plus variable ND, you've come to the right place. So let's first off talk about the actual functionality of this filter. How does it work and all that good stuff. So in order to darken the image using the ND functionality, I have to turn this little knob here. And when you turn the knob, the image will get either darker or brighter, the which way ever you turn the actual knob. That's the ND functionality. And to use the polarizing functionality, you just have to turn the sort of second ring on the actual filter, not the knob, to get the polarizing functionality. So you traditionally use a ND in a settings like if you want to shoot for video. So you want to keep that 180-degree shutter angle, which is essentially double or whatever your frame rate is. If you want to darken the image, you'd probably want to use something like an ND filter rather than stopping down your aperture so you can get that nice shallow to the field effect, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. I have a variable ND on there at 5 stops, and you can use ND filters traditionally for landscape photography, any situation where you just want to essentially take light out of the image. And for polarizers, this is a very special function as well. So what essentially you can do with this is take out reflections in the water or glass or any sort of thing, or make your blues bluer and your greens greener. For me personally, I actually don't care about the polarizing effect as much. I don't really use polarizers in my actual photography. But for anybody who wants to either darken their image or get that nice polarizing effect, you know, that's exactly what these filters are meant to do. So when we're talking about the actual physical construction of this filter, it has a nice metal build. I got the 82mm variant, but you have to make sure that your filter pouch is much larger, and you can't actually put on the lens cap onto the actual filter. I have an 82mm filter size, like I said, and it barely fits into my 82mm filter pouch that I have where I store all my filters, and you can't put any caps on that or anything. But overall, it does have a nice metal construction, and it feels pretty solid. It's not too heavy, and it's just a decent piece of glass overall. So let's talk about the image quality, because the image quality is absolutely the most important part when considering buying a filter like this. And when I talk about image quality, I'm not going to be doing any lab tests or anything where I have charts and all that. That's just not the type of photographer I am. Not very technical when it comes to those sort of things. What I really care about is how it performs in a real world situation. Like if I go out and actually shoot photos, shoot video, and all that sort of stuff, is it going to perform in those scenarios? And generally speaking, yes, this filter does perform, but in certain scenarios, it does kind of fall apart, and I'm gonna be going into that later. So there are 3 aspects that I look at when picking out a filter like this. I look at sharpness, I look at color cast, and I look at vignetting. Those are the 3 most important aspects of buying a filter like this. So let's talk about sharpness first. So when it comes to sharpness, this filter actually performs very, very well. I feel like the images I'm getting don't have sharpness taken away from it if I'm using this filter. You can see my test right here up against the wall. You can see I was at without the filter and then up to 5 stops. And you can tell that this filter is sharp all the way through. There's no sort of deviation from its original state of photos and whatnot. So I would not have any problem with this when it comes to sharpness. And you can see even in my landscape photos that I take, you know, the sharpness is perfectly fine from how it was originally. So when it comes to sharpness, this thing actually performs very, very well. Don't expect a huge drop in your sharpness when it comes to when you're taking your images. Now, color cast is also another important aspect of filters and things like that. And I can say that this filter actually performs very, very well. There is a slight shift in color cast when you're, especially if you're darkening the image more, going more to the 4 or 5 stops range. But overall, when it comes to color cast, it's really not that bad. It's definitely manageable. It's definitely easy to correct in post. Now, I've had filters that were just awful when it came to color cast. Like, they would absolutely just change the color of different colors. Now they would just make like blues, like cyan blue, and just like turn this up green. It just was not a fun experience when using those filters. And I can say for sure that this filter is actually pretty good when it comes to color cast. Now I'm showing you some examples of manual auto white balance. This is manual auto white balance for when I am using no filter, and then going into the 1 to 5 stop range. And you can see that there is a slight shift in color cast. It's somewhat noticeable, but honestly, all of it's correctable in post. You know, I really wouldn't worry about color cast too much. And if you just threw your camera in auto white balance, then you don't have a color cast problem really at all. It's just because, you know, how the actual filter works. And I think the polarization adds a little bit more of a color casting effect. But overall, this filter actually performs very, very well when it comes to color cast. So the third most important part about image quality, and again, I talked about sharpness is pretty good, color cast is definitely more than manageable, but vignetting is where I have the biggest problem. Now we're talking about focal lengths at 24 millimeters and above. So if you're using 24 millimeters, 35 millimeters, 70 millimeters, that sort of thing, this filter is actually perfectly fine when it comes to vignetting. But anything wider than that, and we have a problem. So as you guys know, I'm a landscape photographer, and in one of my videos, I talked about me actually going out and shooting with this filter at 14 millimeters. And you can see that there's some significant vignetting, especially at 5 stops and at 14 millimeters. That's where I find the biggest problem when it comes to vignetting. But it has to be at 5 stops and 14 millimeters specifically. And if it's brighter than 5 stops, it actually performs pretty decently well. But for me as a landscape photographer, I need to be able to perform at every single stop range. So in this video example, I am here at 24 millimeters, and I'm going to zooming out to 14 millimeters, and you can see that vignetting introduced, and you can see it's pretty visible, especially in video. In photos, it's not bad because you can actually correct for it. You can use different things like graduating filters and all that sort of things in Lightroom to able to lighten that part up, and it actually looks decently fine. Like the photo that I shot on that landscape photography POV shoot, I actually was able to correct it and make the photos look pretty decent. So it's definitely manageable and it's definitely correctable, but it is a pretty significant issue, especially if you're planning on shooting at things at 14 millimeters. Another major problem is that when you're actually turning the polarizer, you can actually see the vignetting kind of turn with it. Now, I'm not sure what the technical term for it is, but I think because of the polarization effect, you know, it makes the vignetting a lot worse than it has to be. And that's just the nature of this filter. That's just how this filter operates. But that is also something I have to keep in mind, is when you turning the polarization, it shows that kind of turning in the actual photo. And here's the thing, when you're actually going out and shooting, and you're shooting at focal lengths wider than 24 millimeters, you're going to find that to be a problem, because now you're not going to be able to focus on actually having a decent polarizing effect. You're going to focus on mitigating those issues of the vignetting, which I find to be kind of distracting and defeats the purpose of using a polarizer in the first place. Again, this is only a problem at focal lengths wider than 24 millimeters and at the 5 stop range. Other than that, this filter actually performs pretty well. Even at the 4 stop range or the 3 stop range in 14 millimeters, it can actually perform decently well. But on one of my other shoots that I went on to kind of test out this filter, I was using my 24 to 70, and you can see that this vignetting problem really goes away because you're shooting at things like 24 millimeters and longer than that. And for a lens like a 24 to 70, this thing is perfect. You can actually focus on the polarizing effect if that's what you're into. Me personally, I don't care for the polarizing effect. But like I said previously, even if you are shooting at 14 millimeters and at 5 stops, the effects are definitely able to be mitigated when it comes to post-production. I was able to definitely get those effects of the really dark areas like the vignetting to be mitigated, and the photos came out fine. Like all these photos I shot were with the 14 millimeter focal length. It worked fine in the real world. So is it usable for focal lengths wider than 24 millimeters? It is, but I don't think that you should get this thing specifically for that. I mean, 24 millimeters and above is this thing's sweet range, and I think that it works pretty well if you are using it for those type of scenarios. So image quality was the most important aspect that I need to tackle on this filter, but let's just talk about video now. So let's talk about video with this polarizer, because I think this is actually an avenue where this polarizer slash variable ND will succeed. And now when you think about how this polarizer actually performs for video, it actually performs the same as it were to be with photos. And because, I mean, you're putting the same piece of glass in front of the same lens, in front of the same sensor, and the images are going to be the same. But why I think this will be better for video specifically is because most of the time, when I'm shooting video at least, I'm not shooting wider than 24mm unless I'm vlogging specifically. But most of the time, I'm not shooting wider than 24mm. All my stuff is done at 24mm through 70mm, which is why I have a 24 to 70. But if you're shooting between that range, this filter does absolute magic. And here's the thing, when you're out shooting in bright daylight and you don't have a filter, the only way you're going to be able to keep your 180-degree shutter angle without overexposing the image is by stopping down your aperture. And that introduces things like softness, and you're really just not going to get the best out of your image. And plus, if you want a nice blown out background like this, you're probably going to need a filter so you're able to keep your 180-degree shutter angle and have a wide open aperture. So in that sense, this is absolutely perfect for videographers on a budget who want to make sure that they get a decent polarizer slash ND built into one lens, and this is perfect for that. I know a lot of videographers actually enjoy using polarizing filters, so if you really want a polarizer and an ND in one filter, this might just be the filter for you. So in that sense, that is the main part about this review. I talked about the image quality, build quality, and for video specifically. So let's get right into conclusion of this video and my final verdict. So it is time for my conclusion, guys, and overall this is not a bad filter. It definitely performs when it comes to sharpness, when it comes to color cast, and if you're taking images or videos at focal lengths wider than 24mm, it definitely performs. But that's the caveat, is when you're getting to focal lengths wider than 24mm, especially at focal lengths like 14mm, and you're shooting at 5 stops, is where you get the biggest problem. I like to say that this thing has the biggest problems at the extremes. At extremes like 14mm, at extremes like 5 stops. That is when you get the biggest problem. But if you're a photographer or a videographer specifically looking for a polarizer and an ND filter in one filter, this definitely takes the cake. For me personally, I'm not a huge fan of polarizers. I'd rather do stuff in post, and I can see why you'd want such a thing if you like those images where you're taking out the reflection and things like that. But for me personally, I just feel like I don't need a polarizer when I'm shooting photos. A regular ND would do just fine for me. And so here's the thing, at wide focal length, it is definitely possible to get great images. I definitely did on my last POV landscape photography shoot, and that was shooting with this filter at focal lengths wider than 24mm. I was shooting at 14mm pretty much the entire time, and you can get great images. Don't let that stop you from that. And in the real world, this thing does produce great images. You're going to see some more photos that I took on my little photo shoot with my 24 to 70, and as you can see, it does a great job. You know, being able to use a polarizer definitely adds to the experience and definitely makes different images that you wouldn't normally get without it. And now I think about who this filter is for. I think about mainly videographers because of that polarization effect, and that variable ND when you're shooting video can definitely be a great plus for you guys. And for photographers that don't need to shoot wider than 24mm and you want that polarizer and ND filter in one, this can definitely do the job. And you guys have to remember, this is a budget filter. You know, you can purchase this. I think this 82mm is about $90. I think, you know, it's probably a little bit less than that because they have a little sale going on. But overall, this filter is a budget filter, guys. You have to remember that. It's budget. It's not meant for high-end use. It's definitely for your average consumer. But if you have a little more money to spend, there are definitely some better options. And KNF Concept was gracious enough to give me a code for you guys if you want to pick up this filter. Again, I don't get any commissions or sponsorships or anything from this. So if you guys really think that this might be the right filter for you, I think they gave me a 10% discount code in the description. So for you guys to pick it up if you guys really want one. I'm not telling you guys to go pick it up. If you like what you saw in this video, you can definitely pick one up, but it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Videographers and focal lengths wider than 24mm is what this filter is definitely good for. So let me know what you guys think about this filter. It's definitely an interesting filter. And for all of you landscape photographers that are interested in a variable ND, hold your horses, because I have another video with a different filter that I think you guys would really like. So anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next one.